Welcome to the Nebraska Soybean Board Weekly Market Roundup, being brought to you by Nebraska soybean farmers and their checkoff. I'm Susan Littlefield. To say, wow, what a week we had might be not the best way to sum it up. If you're a cattle producer, you have definitely been watching what happens in the market trade. If you're on the grain side of it, you've seen some of the struggles that have gone on, especially as we've got spring planting now underway. And if you've got wheat, you're really frustrated there. Will Mother Nature bring us the rain it's supposed to and the cooler temperatures this next week? We'll find out all those details as we continue with this week's report.
Imagine a future fueled by soy-based possibilities. A future where creativity and productivity live together under one roof. A future that takes you from point A to point B to point Z, all while ensuring brighter tomorrows for our next generation. A soy-based future? It's already here.
And welcome back once again. As you can see, joining me, Ben Rand. Ben, of course, is with Blue Line Futures and the Home Agency. And then we've got Darin Fessler, Darin with Lakefront Futures. And gentlemen, when I said at the beginning, wow, was a word that comes to mind. It has been an absolutely crazy week of market trade. I appreciate both of you joining us, and I'll let the computer decide who's going to get to talk first. And Darin, they popped your picture up first. So let's kind of, in a nutshell, what was your biggest takeaway from this week in the grain trade?
Corn spreads, the continued push higher on the cash markets on cattle. A lot of end users have already moved their bids from May to July or other months later on and deferred. But the spread action is following a lot of the same things that we had seen in 2013. You can look at 2013 D's corn, 2023 D's corn tracking very similar patterns. Same thing at the spread. So again, if one is bullish corn, I mean, you definitely want to be bullish the May July spread here, because that thing could get really crazy into the first notice over the next couple of weeks. And then obviously the continued push here higher on cattle here. I think this is something that it may have some coattails yet. Just see what the weather does. If you have weather, I think cattle continues quite a bit higher.
All right. What about you, Ben? I know you and I talked earlier this week, and this cattle market's definitely been on fire.
Oh, the cattle market is a sight to behold. I mean, Darin has already really talked about something that him and I personally have communicated back and forth about when we've talked, over the phone or texting or whatever. The correlation, I think, if we're going to look at 12 compared to 22 with the drought monitor and some of the struggles that we saw similar both years, price action similar. Darin hit the nail on the head. We got to compare 13 to 23. There's a lot of correlation there, and the spreads are telling a story for sure. And it could get very Western. We got the Goldman roll behind us now, and we have a lot of these Western Corn Belt end users that have rolled to the July. So it's going to be important that, producers keep an eye on the basis, make sure they know what month they're bidding off of. I think for me, the big story is cattle and seasonality. Technically speaking, we should see a spring high here somewhere, but we are talking about cattle fundamentals that we just have not dealt with probably ever. And when we're looking at comparing, the 13, 14 run up with what we're seeing right now in 23, the pace at which the cattle markets are accelerating the upside is unparalleled. You got April 24 that has now absolutely shattered those records set on the April 15, corn chart or cattle chart, from back in late October of 14 by $6. So cattle guys, I'm happy for them. Really, it's high time that they get these prices for their calves. But of the week, I think wheat's the winner. I think we really carved the bottom out in wheat. I think we saw wheat turn around and really put in a key reversal. So I'm cautiously optimistic that wheat prices have some positivity in them. On the flip side of that, the weather in the wheat belt for HRW is beyond bad, and current conditions are really spectacularly horrible. I was down in the Kansas draw earlier this week and part of last week, and it's like Mars in some spots. I mean, there's topsoil that fills the ditches. There's wheat that just never even came up. So while it's nice to see the price action, we really got to have some precip. That is another thing that Darin and I have both talked about. Gosh, this Western Corn Belt needs some rain.
So I want to come back to cattle, but since we're on the conversation and Darin's head was shaking in agreement a lot on this wheat. What have you seen from pictures that are being shared with you from these wheat growers, whether in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas?
I have clients all across the winter wheat region. It's a disaster, and that might be an understatement. It's when I was sharing this even with my father, who's farmed his whole life. Uh, what is this field? And it looks like a field that's ready to plant, to be honest with you. And it's supposed to be a wheat field, and hopefully we have carved out a bottom in wheat here. My only concern is Kansas City relative to Chicago is historically strong. But the funds really, when we talk about how short the funds are, they're short Chicago. So if we can get them to spook a little bit around in this market, just simply short covering would just be enough to lift the tide and really to have them focus much more on the fundamental side of things. Now, again, it's not just us, and everybody around the world produces wheat. So the French wheat crop is still very good. There's some dryness creeping up in the Ukraine region as well. So there's multiple dynamics here that's going on in the wheat market as a whole. I mean, we're always going to be one of the more expensive wheat markets in the world. That's just how we are logistically. But there is a definite issue here, and the story is spring wheat. The story is winter wheat. It's just now if we can get the funds to short cover a little bit, create that narrative here where, hey, we do have some serious issues here, and the weather has not been our friend. It doesn't look like to me when you come Monday's crop progress how this is ever going to turn around without precip. And even if you get 1 or 2 inches rain, some of it's past due, and it may not matter at this point for some, especially if you're in Southwest Kansas. Rain at this point is probably not going to help you too much.
So then does that mean we start looking for alternative crops to go into that field? Obviously, weather related, if they can get the moisture they need. Is it corn? Is it beans? Is it sorghum? What are you hearing the replacement crop might be?
Or summer fallow. I mean, you simply have to have moisture, and I think I have a lot of clients down in that southwest corner where they're planting hot and heavy now, and they're still them are. What do? We don't know if the rain's going to come. Do we just PP it? Do we? If anything, they probably would go to corn. Maybe some of those regions might go to cotton, but again, cotton's not price wise is not incentivizing guys to do that either. So it's leaning toward the abandonment at this point, and maybe just some summer fallow or cover crops.
So, Ben, what have you seen as you were driving down there? Did you see any sort of field work going on at this point?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of pre going on. The stuff that guys were expecting to put in the corn into corn or sorghum, and there's not a lot of soybeans that are growing out there. So you saw pre going on. You saw a lot of fertilizer, some strip tillage taking place. But I think the thing that's the most alarming is the amount of chiseling that was going along the wheat fields, just trying to preserve some of that topsoil. And Darin's right. We got to look at this from an agronomy and a conservation standpoint to some extent as well. But even looking back into last year, guys that had to do this in Southwest Nebraska and Eastern Colorado that went through this horrible wheat scenario that the guys further south of them are now experiencing. If there's no moisture, you can drill all the cover crop or plant all the corn you want. It is just not going to matter. And it's just really, it's just your heart goes out to those producers in that part of the world because they are up against a set of scenarios where the outcome, there's just no good outcome without precip. And so, yeah, I harp on the precip thing. We have got it. We have got to have it. If they're going to want to do anything besides abandon it, we got to have some rain in that part of the world.
We'd like to see some in our neck of the woods as well with all the fires that we've seen in the eastern part of Nebraska. So soybeans, I mean, we saw the snow melt in the Dakotas with 90-degree weather and snow melting as fast as it did, Darin. It seems like this prevent plant talk has disappeared a little bit, and so has the corn versus bean acres kind of slowed down a little.
Yeah, speaking with clients in North Dakota, the concern 2 weeks ago is not the concern that we're seeing today, and it's a good way. I mean, things are progressing nicely now. I think the bigger concern for a lot of those producers is if they get this inch or two rain, does it compound some issues that with the snow melt that's going on could be an issue here. I have some guys in Northeast South Dakota that are dealing obviously with the same type of issues, some flooding,
Mhm.
but it's minor flooding. It's not major by any means. I think the USDA is kind of spot on here, maybe with these acres. Maybe they are right. Maybe we are at this 92 million because conditions have turned. Maybe they are right on the beans, and that continues to lead me to the belief that if weather's not an issue here, and we still have to think about the potential of a 180 because it is dry out here. I mean, I know the wind here in the Western Corn Belt has really dried things out, and we needed rain desperately. If we get the rains, though, and we get crop in on a fairly timely manner, then 180 is definitely possible. Then we start looking at what is the potential carryout numbers on both corn and beans, because as the beans move out of our export window, they're going to favor Brazilian origin. And so we still don't know about safrinha corn crop. We don't know how our corn crop's going, but let's just say everything pans out. We could be looking at drastically lower levels than what we are right now, where we're 50, 70 cents, maybe $1 lower from here if it gets crazy. So you may got 1 or 2 shots to really be aggressive, reward this market. And it just goes back to my belief here. Maybe the issues that we had 2 weeks ago in the Dakotas are maybe not an issue anymore. Maybe they're just going to get out there late April, early parts of May, maybe second week of May, and be just fine. They were last year, and it ended up being a pretty good crop for a lot of those guys.
All right, Ben, I'm curious. We're going to jump back to this cattle market. As we look at the fact that you talk about the dryness that was seen in Kansas, Oklahoma, that means there's no place for cattle to eat. There's no grazing opportunity as well. Does that put some extra pressure on this cattle market?
Well, yeah, it does. And we got to see some of this pasture come back to life. It's in pretty poor shape. You get west of McCook, and you start working west towards Ray, Colorado, and then south again towards Goodland. And, I drove a lot of those acres just Tuesday and Wednesday going out and meeting with guys, and they are in really, really bad shape. There's a lot of places where guys can't even, landlords aren't even going to allow them to come back. But here's the big caveat. We see a situation where the cattle can come back. Hold on, because those prices are going to go through the roof.
And we talked about that. It'll be an interesting ride that we'll be on. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us this week.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right, Ben Rand, Darin Fessler joining us this week. And as we always remind you on this program, commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss, not suitable to all investors. A look at the markets as we wrap up this Friday trade, being brought to you by the Nebraska Soybean Board, right here on the Rural Radio Network.